Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Why do we care about riffs? Talking about albums containing some of our favorite riffs, sometimes talking to people who make really great riffs. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson. With me, as always, is the great bald hope, the great baldini, Dylan Adams. How's it going, buddy?
Doing well. Sitting here with a new friend of mine over here kind of in the back corner. So if we hear a chime in every so often, we adopted a new dog. So he's kind of hanging out. He's getting used. He's separated from the boy right now.
Yeah, your whole house is a zoo.
It is.
Even with that in mind, we have a very, very special guest. He is a number of things. This is a very, very busy person. Musician, sound engineer, producer, composer. You may know him from such acts as No Gods, Half Cross, Lástima, who have just released a new record, their debut album, A Pain Bloomed from My Lungs. It's out now. I'm of course talking about Richie DeVon. How are you, sir?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me.
How does it feel? It's out. It's out in the world.
It's a work in progress for sure. It's been sort of in the works for basically since the band started. You know what I mean? Like the songs have sort of always been in that flow. So it feels good to finally have it out. A lot of friends worked on it, so it feels really good to finally show it off, you know?
Yeah. I mean, some of these people have been around since the beginning. I want to definitely touch on kind of the history behind this project and a lot of the other things you got going on. But as far as the record is concerned, can you pinpoint like a time? What's the timeline? Where does that actually begin?
Well, the project started like kind of classic black metal way. It's like a solo black metal project in someone's room. But I think like it started forming a band like right before the pandemic. Like I think our first show was supposed to be like March of 2020. Or like May or something like that. But so like, we had a couple songs there, but I think this record in terms of these songs probably came from like the midst of the pandemic of me like really trying to figure out what the sound is. So we released a bunch of EPs and singles, but it wasn't until probably late 2021 into 2022 where like the first sort of like instances and like the riffs and like sort of song structures of these songs started really, really coming together.
It's been like a long time coming then. I didn't realize like some of these songs actually date back as far as that.
Yeah, some songs are actually like there's a couple parts in it where I just like repurpose old demos and stuff like that and put them together and stuff. But yeah, some songs I think like probably the second song on the record or the third song on the record, Asiero on Gone, I think like I've had that one ending riff for like 3 years and I've just been waiting to use it. You know what I mean? I'm sure as you guys know, sometimes you just have that one you just can't let go. You're like, I'm gonna find a place for it. I will find a place for it. But I did, so.
I mean, that's like the old saying, right? Some band, the first two records, you kind of have this like Rolodex of all of these old riffs and all of these old parts sitting around. And then once you get to like, whatever it may be, the fourth or fifth one, or sometimes it is the third one, sometimes it's the second one, you're just blank, right? All of these riffs that have been around, I've got stuff that I still play that I wrote when I was like 15, 16 years old. It's like, you might change a note here or there, but it's all there, like every bit of it. And if it's good and it sticks with you, you're going to find some way to utilize that.
Yeah, no, exactly that. It's exactly that.
Was this always intended to, I just kind of reading up and diving into some of your backstory here, it seems like maybe at first, like you mentioned, even with like the black metal kind of thing, like, all right, this is going to be me. Maybe it's a studio thing, but it did seem like it kind of shifted rather quickly into like, all right, let's play these songs live. Let's, how did that click? Like at what point did it make that shift?
I think honestly, like a weird way of peer pressure almost. I feel like I started the project and it was going to be its own thing. I was going to school for music at the time and I didn't think that I'd be able to really play a lot of these songs live. I didn't think I'd be able to sing them live and play guitar at the same time or whatever. But eventually like there's enough interest from friends and like the community around me where I was like, all right, let's try it. So I had Sam who played drums on the demo and I've known for a while, record the demo, and you know, she implored me like, oh, maybe we should try to make this a thing. And then after some time I was like, okay, maybe we'll do one show. And it was like that first show. And I feel like I was just like sort of trying to trick myself to not thinking that I would, you know, I do love performing live. So I think I was trying to stray away from that, but eventually I think, you know, you kind of just, as you go along, you kind of just end up where you're supposed to be. So the people that played on that first show and stuff like that just ended up, you know, with some changes here and there, like ended up being the core group. Like Sam and Twee have been with me since like the very beginning.
You gear up to play a couple shows, like you said, and then they just kind of like, nope, sorry. But was your first show with our friends in Sun Ra and Quiet Man?
I feel like that was the first one. I'm really bad at remembering shows and who I've played with. Like it's just my memory. It's terrible. But yeah, I think that was the first show at a like a venue bar called Century. But it was a great, honestly, like a great first show. And I feel really lucky to have a community that was like, hey, like, you know, sometimes the first show really sucks and it should suck in a way. But we've been really lucky because, like, you know, we've all played music in the general area for so long that we have like really talented friends that are very supportive.
I think, you know, obviously you have a lot of collaborators on this record, but, you know, as far as production wise, it sounds amazing. And you've essentially handled that. Was this kind of also started as a means to like almost, you know, kind of test yourself? Had you really done, I know you'd worked on some things before, but was this like where you did everything for this project?
Yeah.
Correct?
No, I think it was definitely like an exercise in. I think the main thing that Lástima started out as was a way for me, because like you said, I played in like thrash bands for my entire childhood and stuff like that. I think this was a way for me to try to flex like compositional stuff like that. Like instead of like trying to rip off Slayer again, like it was me being like, okay, let me actually like sit down and try to like compose these things that I was hearing that I really liked from bands like, you know, Godspeed or Mono, or going even to like Alcest and everything, and seeing how those songs were structured. So yeah, I think it was just, I didn't want to have anyone else to deal with my self-indulgence in doing that. So that's kind of why it started solo, because I was like, I'll just do my weird like stuff like that. So naturally, I think the production side of that aspect became just as important as the composition side of it. From both like a logistical, like, man, like bringing this to a studio to record would cost a lot of money and take a lot of time, especially when I was in school. I'm like, not really possible. But at the other side of it, I think it does, if you know what you're doing, which, you know, even as an engineer, like no matter how old or how long you've been doing it, there's still surprises and stuff. There's a lot of creative sort of elements to like production and stuff like that. And I think I've really fell in love with like also doing a lot of like the songwriting in the box when I'm actually mixing and stuff like that.
And how do you attack something like this? Well, like, I mean, there's all these different layers and textures, and, you know, how does a record like this come together from, you know, more of like an engineering standpoint?
A lot of patience. It's a lot of patience. And honestly, a lot of time away from it. I think of this one quote from an interview from the drummer of like Coheed, where they talk about how like they always have a different engineer because like the Coheed set is like so difficult to mix. It's so many different elements, and like Claudio's voice and the drums are doing weird things, and then they have instruments coming from each which way. And as someone that's done a lot of metal production, like it can be really simple because it's like getting a great tone, making sure the songs are tight, making sure the drummer is playing like actually on time and stuff like that. I think with this stuff, like I definitely bite off more than I can chew sometimes with like piano, violin, different vocal things. I think it's just, yeah, it's just patience and like also trusting the ears of other people, right? Like I sent these mixes to different engineers, to friends, so that way, like, you know, when you're so attached to a project, it can be sort of hard to really actually view it like as objectively as you can view music, but from that lens. So yeah, it's just time and organization, really.
It's having that extra set of ears, right? You kind of get ear fatigue after a while, especially sitting, hearing everything, going over it. And you do need that, you know, sometimes it's a, hey, you could do this differently, or you could do that differently. You need someone that's got, you know, no guard, right? You need that, you know, just tell me what it is. Tell me what I need to do. I trust your opinion on that. I do want to highlight the, you know, the kind of mix on this. It's very lively sounding to me. Everything has its own space, which is really difficult in the type of music this is. It's very dense music. It's very layered music. You know, with the type of mix and the type of recording it is, what kind of influenced the recording side of this? What influenced your mix? I know there's a lot of producers and engineers that Austin and I are big fans of, but was there anybody in particular, any sort of sound that you wanted out of this? Obviously, you came from the thrash world, so yeah, that can be a little one-dimensional, right? You know, it's like, all right, drums got to be here, guitars are here. Let's kind of put the bass in the mix a little bit, and vocals are need to sound like this. As long as it's in key, we're good. But what did you draw for Lástima?
It was really difficult actually because and it's like a double-edged sword. Where we've heard this the entire time playing, even live, which is like people just haven't known where to place the sound because it is like there's a lot of influences I'm throwing at it, from screamo to black metal to like even some like grindier stuff, and then obviously the classical element and everything. So really, like I think I looked up to people that have like a really large array in terms of like what their production style is like someone like a Sean Everett, like who does a lot of like, you know, pop and Perfume Genius and Big Thief, but he also was in charge of the last Chelsea Wolf record in a lot of production there. So like seeing how he approaches it, and he's like those engineers, like really I admire the space, like you said, that they have in their records where everything has its place but still feels like one. I think that's always like, at least for me, the goal with anything I do in any production style, which is like you can distinguish like every element of it, but it still feels like it lives in the same world. I think another person who's amazing at that, who like obviously is a huge influence, is like Jack Shirley, who did like Death Heaven, Oathbreaker, like all those like incredible bands, like obviously Loma Prieta. He's the one that mastered everything Lástima did up until this point. We went with Magnus just because I heard some things, and that European style of mastering is like slightly different than like a lot of American mastering engineers in that way. So yeah, I think it was just like trying to take the influences like from metal or in different aspects and even pop or whatever, as more like techniques and tools, and then trying to be as like specific with our sound, knowing that like, okay, you don't want it to, you want it to sound like something recognizable, but you want it to be like your own voice. So it's like, okay, what would they do with certain elements, and how would I put the violin here and stuff like that. So it was more so like a technique sort of influence rather than like an actual like looking at a certain record and trying to like make our stuff kind of fit in that little box.
And you've also like, you know, cut your teeth working at other studios as well. I mean, working Studio 4, that's Will Yip's studio as well. Headroom Studios, Joe Reinhardt. Shout out Algernon Cadwallader. I fucking love that band. How did those experiences shape where you're at now? Like, what did you learn from those different? I'm sure they're very different as far as like sound engineer wise. How does that shape what you're doing now?
It's interesting. I feel really lucky to have bounced around. Like more recently, I've done some work in sort of shared files, I guess, with like Arthur Rizek, who like does a lot of like, you know, Blood Incantation, all those, the Power Trip and stuff. But everyone like at that level does it so differently. But it's such a good thing to learn and like kind of like sneak and steal things from. I think Will is like a master of just like knowing what he wants and like really like creating an environment in that studio where like everyone feels like they're going to give their best take or their best performance or the songwriting and stuff like that. And he's like engineering records that are very, very like sort of like high production value. So I think like from that, like it was learning like how to deal with like, you know, people like Tiger Jar or Caspian and like these bigger acts and like that are doing like 11 track records, 12 track records, and how to sort of organize that time, like I was saying before. That was huge. I mean, the guy's like a workaholic, and I've unfortunately taken that element from him and being like, yeah, 12-hour day is like what you need to do for 7 days in a row. But then like when I ended up at Headroom, it's where I'm still working now and everything outside of like my personal studio. It's really about like creating an environment that like an artist feels really comfortable in, and sort of like more like kind of more like the Albini approach where like you bring your songs, we're not going to really touch them, we're just going to provide the tools and the expertise to try to bring them there. But Joe's also like just as manic and like just detailed oriented as like a Will Yip or an Arthur Rizek. And everyone there is Mark and Kyle, both are the same way. So yeah, it's just different approaches, and I try to steal a little bit from everything I sort of have had the opportunity to like sit in on.
Yeah. Do you remember some of those first days you were there? Remember what you were the headspace you were
For
in?
the Will Yip stuff?
Sure. Yeah. Any of it.
For the Will stuff, I think one of the first things might have been the Tigers Jaw record, which is like as a kid, like growing up in like northeastern PA, I'm just like, oh my God. But I think that was interesting. Quicksand was a really like one of the first ones, and that was super cool to meet like these legendary hardcore dudes and like seeing how they do it. And also, I think those records also taught me sort of not to like that kind of kill your darlings idea or stuff like that, or not to hold things too sacred. You know, I think as we grow up and we look at these big records, we're like, man, like they must have taken so much attention to detail, nothing slipped by. But a lot of times it's also just like, that just sounds good. Like, are we gonna think about it? Like, nah, just it sounds good. Let's just run with it. And it's good to see people at that level still have this kind of more like, you know, just go with the flow mentality about stuff.
One thing I definitely wanted to highlight as well is like just the performances on this record are nuts. I mean, we kind of touched on Sam, or like drum play, like even watching the concert video to really like actually see like the movements that were going on, and just the shifts in style is incredible. And of course, like Twee being like all over the record, really just kind of carrying this melody, and obviously you're creating such all this space and texture. You know, with it being such a personal project, you know, this is your experience, and you know, I'm sure it takes a lot of trust to like allow, you know, and obviously they're very capable players, but you know, I'm sure there's a lot of trust there, and like in collaborating, and like, you know, how do you present a piece, like, you know, where do they come into this part?
I mean, everyone's like really almost, if it was a different world or we'd be doing a different genre, they'd all be like insane session players that would just play on any record. Sam has such a good like ear and has such a good like sort of Rolodex of genres that she can sort of pull anything up and like within a couple takes, like being like, I got it or whatever. And obviously Twee, like with her expertise and her knowledge and you know, pedigree in school and everything like that, like is the same way. But yeah, I usually like write, I would say like 80% to 90% of the song, like in terms of like the parts, the composition. And then you know, I need to hear the drums when I write guitar. That's just how I've always been in, like even earlier, like earlier bands, like it would always be like me and the drummer, or me, the other guitarist and the drummer. Like the drums would have to always be a component of like the riff making or the songwriting and everything like that. So I would never call myself a drummer, but I can get behind a kid and just do what I got to do. So I usually the songs are pretty much done when they get to these to Sam or to Hazel or to Twee. But then like I kind of let them sort of take a spin at it, especially on the violin. It's just like, sure, I could write lines, but there's certain sort of idiosyncrasies in her writing that I kind of want to lean into. Same with Sam. It's just like, yeah, like I know as the Latino in the group, like I have to write the reggaeton beat. She's not gonna think of putting that with a black metal riff, but like she like and I have been working together so long that she's understanding of being like, okay, I know what you want to do there, but like this works better, and kind of doing that. And then also in the process, I'm sure as you guys understand, like in the process of like playing a song and practicing it over and over again, eventually everyone makes those parts their own and they slightly shift. And I always think that's for the better. You know what I mean? Like I don't want it to sound like I did it in Logic with a MIDI file. Like I do want it to feel like everyone's unique spin on this, you know? So I feel very lucky to like you said, be able to trust them in that and like be proven right with that trust.
It's you know, I love that you brought up some of the stylings there, because I mean, you know, maybe on paper someone could read that and be like, that doesn't work. What the fuck are you doing? But you listen to it and it's like, it's very, when I first heard it, and shout out to our friends in Wretched Blessing, because they shared it and I came across it and I was like completely blown away by that first single. And you know, it's very clearly someone's own unique voice and take on this. And you know, obviously like you can sense where the influences are, but putting those together, it's like they're definitely very unique and it's your thing. And you know, sometimes that doesn't always work. Sometimes you may be like, I'm going to smash the thrash and the death metal thing here. Yeah. And it's like, here's the thrash metal part. Here's the death metal part. This feels like a very fluid, just, it feels very thought out. And it was such an enjoyable listen. And I think it's also just a kind of a testament to maybe where things are now. Like we start to see more and more of this. There's like, it's almost like boundless, like with some of the experimentation that's going on. Is there a place that you see maybe this form of music going, or is there a place that you would hope that it would go? I would love to maybe hear your take on that.
No, I mean, definitely I could go into like a diatribe about all this
Sure.
because I think about this stuff all the time. But no, I think underground heavy music is in a really interesting place because I think like, you know, there's a lot more emphasis on like DIY again, I feel like. Just because, of a thousand things going on in like the world, right? Like the economic status of people, like the sort of like different cultural shifts that are happening, and sort of like again, as musicians, like Spotify and all those things that I think really like do affect like kind of where we end up from a band standpoint and stuff. And I think as music gets like sort of shifted, like this music gets more shifted underground in those communities, I think those influences like will just end up there. So we just did the tour and everything like that, and seeing like the rise of like screamo, early 2000s emo, and seeing that also like blend with like metalcore that's from that same era, because like kids like now that are 18 are listening to that early 2000 stuff, and there's no distinguishing from those genres in terms of just like, oh, that's just the bands that were playing in 2003. Like it's
Yeah.
going to
Right.
be at the drive-in, but it's also going to be like early Bring Me the Horizon. We're just going to like do that with it, and it's cool to see. And I think it's just like there's a like when there's not a light shining directly on it and like people are paying attention, I think very interesting stuff happens in the underground. So I mean, I would love to see more of these like quote unquote like predominantly like white genres like black metal or like death metal and stuff like that start to see more influences from like marginalized communities. And like that's why I sort of like push and like very much emphasize that in our music, because I think like black metal has a really kind of sketchy past and stuff like that. And I love, like, I go back and I listen to like everything from the very beginnings of like black metal and stuff like that, like from like if you want to call Venom that in that first
Sure.
record, that
Yeah. Yeah.
even up to like now and stuff. And so I understand the history of it, but I think like you have bands like Black Braid, that's like an indigenous black metal band and stuff
Absolutely.
like that, that rip, that like it's amazing. And I feel like, okay, that's how you like take this genre and go like, okay, those people don't own this. And I think like in these like lower kind of like more underground communities, like you have a lot of brown people making music, and I would like to see sort of more of those like cultural influences bleed in and start to mix in with these other genres like that.
I love that. Blackberry 3. It's coming.
I know.
It's coming soon.
Man.
I
So
know. I've been
stoked.
seeing all the teaser stuff. I'm so
Ah.
excited.
Drop the record to pre-order. Fucking drop it. Just do it.
Yeah, right? Yeah, just drop it. I need it.
Um, I'm glad that you mentioned kind of early 2000s emo, because I caught a lot of that on this record, a lot, just like production wise, the whole gambit. And I'm kind of a caveman when it comes to like emo music and everything. Luckily, I've got Austin sitting across from me, and our third severed head that's not on the episode today, Justin Swindle, that could really like school me on it, because my brain goes to like what was in vogue at that time, right? Like I'm 30, I'm 35. I had to think about it for a minute because I'm fucking ancient. But like I grew up watching videos that were on Fuse or MTV2, and it was like the big names, right? Like Hawthorne Heights, Taking Back Sunday, all of that. And I hear some of those production and dynamic sounds on this record from that. And it's great that you brought that up, because I think sometimes those early influences that we all have when we're younger, we kind of like, we kind of frown upon that. And we look at it as like, I grew up with that. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm off to like listening to Hate Eternal records or something.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And then you look at it and you go, oh, it's still there. Like there's a ton of stuff like, Austin, I've been making jokes for years, or he's been making jokes at me for years for listening to Coheed and Cambria. And it's like, oh yeah, that's in my playing. That's in my fucking playing.
I don't remember the fucking album, but there's that one song at the end. I remember sitting through it, and it almost sounds like no disrespect to Coheed, I appreciate it. It sounds like an Ewok, like the end of Return of the Jedi with the Ewok party. I'm like, what's happening here?
No, they're weirdos, all those guys. But yeah, no, Dylan, you're right. Like I think like I grew up, and obviously I think we all had that phase where like you grew up and you kind of listen to, I remember when I was like in middle school and high school, I was the most insufferable like metalhead you can imagine. I was just like, I'm not listening to anything post 1996. It's all garbage. And I was just like that guy, like, but then like as I started like going to high school and like listening to more like modern metal bands and stuff like that, like I couldn't help, like I was a huge MCR fan, like growing up and stuff. And I went away, started to listen to more underground stuff, like stuff that no one listened to, like the less views it had on YouTube, the better. But then I think you come back around of it, especially doing production and everything. You go back and you listen to those early records, and like, I mean, I think Three Cheers, and that first used record, for example, if we're talking that era, like
Jerry Finn.
yeah, they're like
Oof.
such good records, and like the production style is definitely aged, but like MCR is writing like At the Gates riffs, and like that first used song is like such a ripper of a song. You were like, damn, this was like a Billboard song. Like that's kind of crazy. And I definitely like a lot of there's parts in the songs like I think anytime you hear an octave lead, it like those octave leads and like the choruses or whatever. I mean, that's just me being like, yeah, I love like, Three Cheers like by MCR. Like there's no hiding and stuff like that. So I'm the production style I did not catch. So that's something that was subconsciously maybe came out of me production wise, but it's interesting to hear that.
Yeah, it just had this. I know sometimes when we say polished, especially in the type of music we're all big fans of, it kind of is viewed as a negative, right? But there's nothing wrong with it sounding good, and it had that kind of charm from that era of, oh, this sounds really good and pleasing to the ear. Especially with like in a good set of headphones or anything. And it sounds really pleasing and it doesn't sound harsh or like it's not too loud. It just sounded, you mentioned the MCR production, like it sounded like it was well-rounded and it was very well and hi-fi sounding at that point.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely a balance that to try to get, which is just like, there's so many production styles that I really, really do enjoy. But it's like I did not want it to sound too polished. I did not want it to sound like,
right.
Is that a drummer? You know what I mean? Like where you're trying to like kind of figure out like, is that a replacement? Again, every style has its own sort of like place in that. But I wanted to feel like real people playing it. Like I sound like an old man, but I wanted to sound like real people playing it, but also at the same time, like if it came on a Spotify shuffle or whatever with like some of these other records and stuff, like it wouldn't feel like, oh, this is just some DIY band from Philly. Like I feel like I wanted to sort of sit in that place with like people that I like to listen to and admire and everything. So
I do want to maybe shift gears a little bit. One question that we often ask people on this show is what makes a riff? I feel like in a lot of forms of this music, I mean, I wouldn't call your band like strictly a riff type of band. I feel like there's a lot more going on, like atmospheric wise, but you do know your way. I mean, you're wearing an Exodus shirt. You like we all came from that Gary Holt camp at some point or another. What makes a riff to you as a musician, as a listener? What draws you in? What do you look for? What does it need?
I think I actually saw a clip of y'all's of the guy from Imperial Triumphant answer, and I thought he had such a good answer. And I was like, fuck. But no, I think for me, when I hear a riff, it's something that's like it has to feel maybe not anthemic, but it needs to be like you can pick it out of a crowd, right? It needs to be unique and stuff like that. And I think in a very ironic way, like one of the jokes I always tell people is like, because I was in No Gods and like one of the main writers in No Gods and stuff like that. When I formed Lástima, I was just like, I don't want to write a riff. I just want to see how far I can get without trying to like do these kinds of things. But again, they end up there anyways, right? Like I like no whole Megadeth records. Like it's just in my fingers at this point. You know what I mean? So I think a riff is just like something that like it could be a vocal riff, it can be like a violin riff and everything. It's just something that has a sort of like character to it. It's not just a throwaway thing like, oh, that's just a D beat or whatever. Like that's not really a riff. But like if we're talking about Coheed, like those records have drum riffs in it where you're like, that's him. Like that can't be anyone else. Like that I sing that in my head. So for me, like there is a catchiness to it. I think about Todd Jones from Nails, like he did this thing where he talks about writing music and stuff like that. And he's like basically says like, I'm trying to write like a catchy pop single here, right? But I'm just doing it like in this drop tuning and like with like the gnarliest guitar tone and stuff like that. And I think that's why like Unsilent Death, like it holds up so well because those riffs are like catchy, they're anthemic, they're very like characteristic to the band. You know what I mean? So like when I write something, I do try to make it be like, okay, if this is gonna stand alone as its own guitar riff, like I want it to be something like recognizable that like when you hear it, you're like, oh, that's that band. Even if you hate it, you're like, I hate that, but I know who that is, you know?
We've mentioned a few names already. I would be curious to know, do you remember some of the first riffs you learned?
I think it had to be an Iron Maiden song. I feel like Run to the Hills or something like that.
Sure,
Right?
yeah.
I think it was probably that because I was definitely like, again, wore the shirt not thinking, but like, definitely was listening to like that era of music. But yeah, it probably was Iron Maiden. I think maybe it would have been maybe like a Green Day song or something early on. I think the first riff I remember being like, oh, holy shit, like maybe I can play guitar. I learned like Rattlehead by Megadeth, and I was like, oh, dude, I got this. And you know what I mean? When I was like 12 or 13.
I mean, some of those earlier records too, like of any of those, like
Mhm.
big name thrash band. I mean, like you could learn guitar playing along to Kill 'Em All
Absolutely.
easily.
Yeah,
Like there's just,
easily.
and I mean, I feel like I was kind of in the same camp as you. It's kind of interesting how maybe some metalheads, and including myself, you fall into this weird trapping of like a thing that doesn't even matter. Like, oh, if it's past like X amount of year, like I
Right.
gotta
Yeah.
have this viewpoint.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then, but there's just so much out there. And yeah, I love that you mentioned Green Day as well. You're a big American Idiot guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the first CD I got was like, in terms of like, you listen to everything when you're a kid. My mom's like playing Ricky Martin in the house. I'm like, all right. But like the first CD I remember my sister like gave me and was like, you need to like listen to this, was American Idiot. And I think when you have only heard like peripherally like pop and whatever and that early 2000 stuff, and like you hear like American Idiot, like as like an 8-year-old, it like blows your mind. You're like, what is this?
Yeah. I think my dad had that fucking CD before I
Yeah.
did. Like it was so, but when you just see that, and obviously that was a huge like visual band as well. Like, I mean, even then it's like at the time being young and hearing that, I was like, I was not familiar. It's almost like two different generations of that band, like had already experienced. And then I'm assuming we're probably the same age. It's like, yeah, it kind of let you off to the races at that point.
100%. Yeah.
You look at a record like that, and then Austin mentioned the obviously the band had kind of their second wind at that point with that record, and it was almost like a brand new band blowing up.
Yeah.
Because if you mentioned Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge, same year.
That's
Those two
crazy.
records came out same
That's
year.
crazy.
And you had this newer band coming up, blowing everybody out of the water. You had Green Day coming out playing like stadiums at this point. But to get to the point, you look at the two grandest tracks on that record. You look at like Jesus of Suburbia, right? Like these long, just extremely well plotted out tracks that everything made sense. And then you look at like your writing, right? And you look at, it's not really based off of a riff. It's based off of an idea or a melody or a thought process. And that stuff is implanted into us from a long time, from years and years ago. It's like, hearing, I can remember hearing Battery in a car for the first time, like the back seat, like center seat of a Honda Accord, like blaring and just losing my mind. Like, to this day, nothing is going to beat that moment. But no matter what, there's some sort of dissonant minor chord in anything that I play. And it's like, you look at your songwriting process, and you mentioned it could be any sort of riff. It could be any sort of idea. It could be a melody, lyrics, anything like that. And you just look and you take all of your influences and you move forward and you go, all right, no holds barred. Everything's on the table. Let's see what we can do, and let's see what we can put in here and draw from any and everything.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Like I remember Jesus Suburbia, I think is still like one of like, if I were to pick a top 5 tracks like that are important to me, it has to be one. Like it has to be like, it was just like, especially that young, I had never heard anything like that. And I think, hearing songs like that, I for some reason, and I can't tell you why, like would always be drawn to like tracks like Jesus of Suburbia or like Orion. And then like later on, like in finding bands like Godspeed and everything like that, it was just like, oh, these like really like these tracks that like sort of don't have a typical beginning, middle, and end. They're just taking you somewhere. I've always been really drawn to that. Obviously, like I think I try to make sure I always try, like the next record, like I'm already writing songs and stuff like that, like trying to constrain myself to like not write an 8-minute song, like just stick to like, right, like not because I don't think those don't have like any sort of place, but I think like as just a writing exercise, it's like, can I do the things that I heard in like Jesus of Suburbia or those other songs, and can I just do that in a shorter amount of time? Can I get to those ideas quicker? But yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, you said it better honestly than I've ever been able to sort of think about it.
We talked about first riffs, first show you ever saw.
My first show was Green Day. My
Really?
first,
Killer.
yeah, first show was I don't remember who opened, but it was Green Day here in Philly, and I was 2009.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my first show, and then my second show was it shows you the era was Avenged Sevenfold.
That's funny.
Yeah, I know.
We're talking. Is that the record we're talking about?
We're doing no. We're doing City of Evil, and in the next episode we all
Okay.
get together.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah.
that record also blew my mind as a kid. I was like, "What? You can do this?"
Right. It's like
See-
a weird prog metal record.
Yeah.
Talk about embarrassing like first shows. I got one that can beat everybody here. It was given to me. I was 14, 15 years old, so it was like 0405. I grew up in Arkansas, so like the armpit of the South. And we did not start getting really good shows till I was around like 16, 17 years old. And at least to my knowledge, I grew up in the sticks, but it was Nickelback, Three Doors Down, 12 Stone. If anybody remembers them, 12 Stone was, okay, if you've ever heard the big hit off of the Evanescence album, Bring Me to Life, the vocalist of 12 Stone is the guy that does the rapping part in that song. But it was those three bands. Puddle of Mud, that's the other one. Just like butt rock 101, right? And the best thing about that show was like Nickelback comes out and they are what they are, but they played the Four Horsemen. They played Sad But True. I went, all right, I'm good. Like this is fine. And second show was Velvet Revolver headline. It was a Halloween show. And it was Chevelle, like, or
That's
was
kinda sick,
direct support.
actually, yeah.
Chevelle, that record they did, This Type of Thinking, I still think is a great record.
Hell yeah.
First guitar you ever owned? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was like some Fender, like those, like, you know, when your parents are just, they're like, I'm getting into guitar, you're like, sure you are, like, we'll get you this like weird like Fender we found at Target kind of thing. Yeah, it was like, it came with a little amp and everything like that, and it was like a disgusting like candy red Strat. I think it's to this day why I can't own a Strat. Like, I just remember hating that guitar even before I knew anything about guitars, being like, why does this suck to play? And then it's just like, oh, because it's like made out of plastic.
You have some beautiful guitars, though. I like was foaming at the mouth at that Dunnable you have.
Oh yeah, it's over there. Repaired headstock. It's headstock broke once.
Oh man.
Oh, did it really?
Yeah, it just fell and just snapped right off. And luckily, the people here at DePinto fixed it, and they did such a good job.
I feel like you use a couple different guitars on this record. I feel like I saw where you maybe, do you have like a Jazz Master or like a Jaguar as well?
Yeah, a Jazz Master is like my main guitar for this band. It's got like, it's one of those guitars that has a cool history where it's like I got it from a really, really close friend of mine. Actually the person who has designed a lot of our artwork and stuff like that in terms of like the layouts and everything. He bought that guitar off of John Kunz from Rivers of Nile.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he has that guitar
that's rad.
from him, and it's like weird because it's like it's clearly been like modified and has like a humbucker, but it has like the classic like Jazz Master in the neck. But like because of that, like my favorite position is like right in the middle because it blends both this humbucker and this warmer sort of Fender sound. So like it was perfect for the amount of times we go from like distortion to clean. I never go to the up position. It's always like down or middle. So like that's the main guitar, and then I think I bounced around with that, and then used like the Dunnable or maybe even like my SG for some leads on the stuff. Yeah,
that's awesome. I mean, I feel like any of us who like play music, I feel like depending on what you're doing, it just elicits like a different feeling. Like maybe one guitar, it's not doing it, but for some reason you pick up, if it's the neck or whatever, you just start riffing away. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a lot of my guitars, like I'm looking at them because they're all over here. I'm looking at them and none of them are like, I only have two Fenders, and one's a Jaguar and one's a Jazz Master. And they both do very different things because of the pickup configuration and everything. but even like I have an Explorer and that plays nothing like the SG. And so I like having sort of different things because they do elicit a different feeling. Like you play the Explorer and you feel like you should be like chugging and doing, weird like sort of 80s riffs. But the Fender, I don't know, it plays really nice, and I think like it just responds really well in terms of like a lot of the chord stuff we do with Lástima. Like it's just the right scale length. It fits everything, like all the stretches I'm doing. So it's an easy one to pick up and tour, and it's been a monster on tour too. That thing it just survives everything.
So, talking about first riffs, first guitars, how long between that like Strat and Panic? Like, how was that your first band, or was
God, I can't believe it's a name that's still around.
that?
Damn, that's crazy. I haven't thought about that band in forever. I think like I moved to that area like when I was in fourth grade, and I met those dudes like a few years later. So I want to say like it was probably like good 4 years, maybe less between that, because I think it was 10 when I got my first guitar. But I didn't really like play it like I should have. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, whatever. But I think like once you start meeting people that play music, it sort of incentivized you. And I think yeah, it had to be like when I met those dudes like when I was like 14, 15, 16. And I think I was in that band when I was like around 16 or 17. I genuinely do not remember. I think that went into the memory hole because I just do not want to think about me like literally just ripping off Metallica for like straight and being like, I just want to write the lightning riffs.
There's some, I could tell what you were into at the time. There's definitely, I think there was one piece of album art that had like a pizza on it or something like that.
Oh my
Maybe.
God. Yeah, there was. Oh God, that's crazy.
Hey, I get it. We were all there. You had. I
Oh
thought,
man, it's so funny.
I gotta tuck these skinny jeans into my high tops. Like I gotta
Yeah,
do all these things.
absolutely.
Right.
100%. That's crazy. Yeah, I haven't thought about that band forever. But yeah, there was just like, I think I always, even younger bands that I record and stuff like that, they sometimes ask like, oh, we're trying to put together a band, or like, we have these songs. Like, what? I'm just like, just put it out. You have to just like kind of get it out there. Because I think like one, it sort of either incentivizes you to either get a good response and to get some feedback, but also I think it just clears the way for hopefully better stuff to come out instead of just being like, oh, I have these riffs that have held on forever and stuff like that. I think when you're young, just put it out. It's gonna sound terrible. Everyone's gonna hate it. You're gonna cringe at it later, but like, it's hopefully the first step in a longer journey.
I mean, that band essentially became No Gods, right? Like it's all the same guys.
Yeah, practically like the main three, which is like me, this guy Joe, and this guy Vinny. Just sort of like changed the name, and sort of with that change like the style. I think we got a lot more death oriented, like in terms of like death metal stuff. At the time when that first record came out, like it was that big era of like metalcore and like a lot of like resurgence happening in hardcore. So like Code Orange had just come out with like My World. You started seeing Power Trip playing shows. You started seeing bands like Iron Reagan play hardcore shows, and Gate Creeper started to enter the fold and stuff like that. So I think that really influenced it because that's the shows we were going to. So it's just like, man, like the straight and true like thrash revivalism from like the 2010s wasn't really like we weren't in love with it, and we're like we want to be like heavier, and so like that's sort of like why we could sort of not only change the name but the style of everything.
I gotcha. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we talk about it all the time. I was very much in that world as well. Like loved. I was right front and center anytime like when they were doing like Iron Reagan stuff. I was like, I mean, that's really like the guys who were able to make it out of that whole thing. I feel like
100%.
But yeah, I mean, what was that scene like? I mean, yeah, all those shows. I mean, yeah, you have because they're Code Orange from are they Pittsburgh?
They're Pittsburgh, yeah.
Yeah. So who else was like around in your area that you were going to see? Like, were there any local bands, or maybe like the older brother kind of bands in that
Yeah,
area?
no, I think in the because we grew up in like the Lehigh Valley, and that band was like actually didn't appreciate it until, or that area I didn't appreciate it until later, was like really big for like emo stuff. Like this band Snowing is from there, and like obviously all that kind of cool stuff. But for us, like honestly, it was weird because we were getting out of that thrash sort of revival type of like things where we play like with bands like Condition Critical,
Oh yeah.
like if you remember those dudes and everything. And that was super cool, and there was a lot of experience, but it wasn't like it was the hardcore shows that like we started playing that we like actually felt like the best response, and like it started feeling really good to play these VFWs and stuff. In terms of bands, like I genuinely can't remember. There's this one band from, I think they were from Ohio, that we really all loved. They were like defunct and stuff like that, but it was a band called Poured Out. And they're from, and they had this like weird kind of cool metallic hardcore sound, and I think that influenced us a lot, and like we loved playing with those dudes. If you look up the record for Poured Out, it's like the one that has like this weird heart on it. We loved that, and I think like that was those are the types of bands we were playing with at the time, and it was a lot of fun, and playing like again like weird sort of modern versions of some Slayer riffs for like hardcore kids, like was just it went over really well, and it was a lot of fun to do.
Damn. Oh, Snow. It pisses me off that Swindle's not here because I want to say Snowing played his house, maybe, and we all like kind of met each other in the same area, and it was so funny. I was listening to an interview and you name dropped somebody. You name dropped We Were Skeletons. I was like, oh, I remember seeing that band in Swindle's like bedroom, basically, and it's like I don't know. There, a lot of that stuff is just so unique. I feel like getting into more of that type of music opened me up to like different. It's just it doesn't have to be so like angular and like riff heavy. Like you could really just listen to what you're playing and like try it all.
Absolutely. Like, no, exactly. I think like listening to a band like Pianos Become the Teeth, I think another one where it's like they became a huge influence on me, especially like coming from a more metal background, because it was like, damn, some of these things are so heavy and so emotional, but there's not like a traditional like sort of like scale based riff. It's like more like the rhythm of the chord with the drums, and I'm just like, damn, that just hits hard. So yeah, 100% agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, you could get like I get chills listening to, like I feel like I would have the same experience maybe like the first time I heard like something off of P Cells, and then when I got to like Title Fight, and I was like, oh my god, this is there's hooks and like there's so much impact behind a lot of that music. It's crazy.
For sure.
But you're that speaks to you too. I mean, you're just all over the place musically. I mean, I feel like looking at some of your discography, I mean, like you've had quite a busy few years in some of the bands you did. I felt like that maybe like the first Lástima release came out, and then you were doing like a power violence band. Like all of this shit just came all out at once, where you were just like juggling all of the like. How do you? Is it difficult for you to like maybe switch hats? Like how do you write something for maybe like a project that's romantic and emotional, and then you're just able to like shift into like Half Cross and like write some filthy ass shit?
Well, luckily for Half Cross, I don't write a lot of this stuff. I'm more sort of like someone that helps like produce, and like I started as like a hired gun. Like I actually record their vocals first, and then they needed a guitarist, and I was like, all right, like, and so it's fun because I just can kind of like listen to these riffs that M writes and just sort of be like, hey, we should play that slower, or let's try this way. So it's much more of like a kind of hands-off approach to them. But I actually prefer and like am trying to do more stuff like that, like separate everything, because I think it does create more clarity for when you go back and do the other thing, right? Like the No God stuff is so much fun to write now and to record and everything, because it is so different from the Lástima stuff. And then like even today I was working with a band right before this call that's like straight like grindy death metal kind of stuff, and that's cool because then like tomorrow I have to go help like an indie project and like songwrite for them, and I feel like it each like provides a sort of like lesson and everything. And I have too many interests and I like varied styles of music. I think I'd get bored just sort of doing the one thing. And I think like, yeah, like you said, with the even going back to like the We Were Skeleton thing or the snowing thing, it's like you do learn different things from different places. And I think like you can take that and bring it back here. And I think that's more unique than trying to just like recycle something over here kind of thing, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. How do I approach it from this perspective or like this genre? Like how would they attack that? And I wonder, is there anything that you haven't tried that you would love to do in the future? Like what's left out there? I feel like you've tackled so much.
I try to stay busy. I think I would love to, and it's been something that like is a very different production style, but I think it's so fun. I love the stuff like Poppy's doing, and like that sort of like weird mix between like metalcore and pop and everything. I think Rina Sawayama released that one record that one year, I think 2020, that like you can tell was very poply influenced. Like you had like new metal guitar, but pop vocals, but like going back to the 2000 stuff. I love when I see that mix of stuff like you said, like when it works well, it's great. Like, but on paper, you're like, this doesn't match up. Like, you can't do a Britney Spears hook with a corn riff. Like, it's not gonna work. But she made it work, and I love that kind of stuff. And I think it'd be super interesting to sort of like blend those two worlds that I'm in, which is like the more metal underground side, and then like with Headroom doing a lot of indie and pop, sort of like trying to find a way to bridge those two gaps.
Did Half Cross do a Paramore cover?
We did, yeah.
Yeah.
We stuck it in. Yeah, that was my idea.
Yeah.
I was like, yo, this Paramore, like, again, talking about like unexpected riffs, like that one Paramore song, like this is like a breakdown riff. I'm like, they like wrote a hardcore riff and just snuck it in there, and I went like, no, we're gonna do that.
Hey, I mean, like you think of maybe like I feel like it gets talked about at least some point where like if maybe you change the vocals out, I mean, Weezer, that tone itself is like
True, yeah,
filthy. Like it could
nasty.
Yeah, depending on in what context, I feel like it could be a totally different band.
I mean, I love that kind of stuff. Honestly, like another thing that I would love to work on is like something like if you listen to like the last King Woman record, talking about Jack Shirley and stuff like that. I think that's some of the best produced drums. Like they're not like hyper produced, but like they just sound so big and so real. And like honestly, in my opinion, like they sound gnarlier and heavier than like some like sludge bands I hear. But it's like the context is different because it's like King Woman is a lot more like dreamy and dark and stuff. Where like if you threw that on like a Sumac record, like it make perfect sense, you know?
Man, that is a really Celestial Blues, that right? Is that
so good?
So
One of my
amazing.
favorite records of like probably this past decade.
100%. I mean, geez, there's so much. I love the video. You've worked with Sonny in the past, or at least he's filmed like No Gods and Lástima quite a bit. Where did the idea come to do like a concert film? Came up so well. Loved watching it.
Thank you. No, it was a lot of work. I think the idea came from the fact that the band, it's been playing live and stuff like that, but just because we're all like working class people and we all have a ton of projects and stuff, like touring extensively isn't like really as sustainable as I think it used to be. And I think you're seeing that even with a lot of bigger acts, like sort of like struggling with like what touring looks like these days, and so for me, like being a very visual person and someone that's like, okay, like maybe we can't like tour across the United States, but like how can we sort of reach that audience or whatever. And I think Sonny had filmed us, like you said, a few times, and so I just brought it up to him the next time I saw him. Just like, hey, I had this idea, like I want to do this thing, and I personally wouldn't make a music video, at least not now, because I'm just like, well, it's like it's not really what, it doesn't really feel right, like it's maybe too expensive or whatever. And like half the times I'm not watching music videos either. Like I can't tell you the last time like I watched a music video, like a new one. So I was like, okay, like I want to do something special, and I saw what he did during the pandemic, and what he's done like a couple other times with like these live music video things. So I brought it up to him, and I know he doesn't really do it, but I think he was both like, we both like have very similar politics, and at the same time he's like, I filmed you like 5 times, what's one more time, but just like on a roof. So I think that also helped with just like I wanted to provide him and everyone else that worked with something that would be rewarding to work on. Like, hey, I want to also do something that everyone would find cool. So when we scouted and looked for places, we saw that place, and Sonny was with me, and we both were like, we got to do it here. Because like we got up there and leaves were falling, and then like the train was passing by, and we're like, oh, here. It's not built to be a studio. It was a nightmare to sort of make work, but it looks cool.
It came, and you timed it so well with like the sunset and everything. It was just, oh my God, it was awesome.
It was a lot of luck.
Yeah. Well, it seemed like, there were, definitely it felt like maybe some changes. Like I loved the experience of watching it, listening to the record, because I did feel like there was differences and maybe like how you transition from song to song. I feel like there was a sample that you used that I was curious about that maybe was during the live footage that wasn't on the record. And I could be wrong, and please forgive my pronunciation, but Lagrimas Negras, is that right?
Yeah.
What does that song mean to you? I know it is Black Tears. What does that song mean to you? Like, why did you want to include it in that and maybe not so much on the record?
I think like you're spot on. I always try to make the live show a little different than the record, whether not just like in terms of like, okay, obviously things are faster or whatever, and just kind of like the energy of the show, but I also like love when I see bands and artists that I've like sort of changed things and like the experience is a little different. I think like I don't know, that's rewarding to see, so I try to lean into that. But that sample specifically came from I believe this Cuban documentary that I was watching about like Cuban music. And it's this like, you know, very old sort of folky song and just someone's just singing it on the street. But I liked sort of the like normal like working class element of like this music, and especially like in Latin America music is just so, not that it's not in anywhere else, but it's like my experience, it's like everywhere, and like people just singing in the streets, dancing and stuff like that. Like we make a parody of ourselves of being these romantics and everything. And I really liked it, but I also liked in classic Latino fashion, like these really pretty songs are always so over dramatic and like filled with like sort of, you know, melancholy and stuff like that. And that song is too, right? It's got this sort of really joyous hook, and like there's like a lot of things, if you find versions of it that feel a little more happy, but it is a sad song, like it's a heartbroken song and everything. And so I thought that fit the vibe of the band really well. And yeah, so I think it sounded cool. I love where it came from, and I think like it's a nice little sort of appetizer for like the songs that come after it.
Yeah, I thought it fit incredibly well. And obviously you went on a tour. You did. I know you said like, yes, we live in a climate where that good old capitalism, it's hard to just be working musicians out there. But how was the tour? You got to come out, I think, probably, I live in the Chicagoland area. I feel like you guys maybe made it out here like earlier in the year, perhaps, or what's the experience been like getting out on the road playing these songs?
It's been great. Like, yeah, we did a tour in March, and then sort of like purposely kind of sandwiched the record between two tours. Like we did one in March, like a bigger weekender that went out to Chicago and back. And then this most recent one was probably like the most extensive one in terms of like how far we went out, which is like Austin, Texas, went down south and went up. And it was great. It was like, especially for playing the places for the first time, you know what I mean? Like nothing was ever like necessarily like an empty room. And we had even like great turnouts for some of them. And yeah, it was a really great experience. And I like performing live, and I like being able to see new places and meet new people, especially like people that come up and recognize samples like that, or, you know, sort of the subject material of the record, and come up and say something that's always like really worth kind of making those trips for.
Was there a place that surprised you that you're definitely going back to next time?
We did really like playing Austin. That was a great time. And the two places were like some of the most like sort of like easily skipped over places, honestly, that we had the best time in, which was like Lafayette, Louisiana, and Charlotte, North Carolina. We had played Charlotte once before just because we were supposed to play Asheville. But then that was the time of like that hurricane last year. And so like Asheville like had this huge tragedy. So we had to like reroute and everything. And we played Charlotte like on a whim. And both times have been some of the most like rewarding experiences in terms of like people coming out and saying nice things. And this past show that we played was like a lot of return sort of people, that fans and everything like that, and like a bigger crowd. We played the Milestone, which is like a very legendary spot and things. Yep. So it's North Carolina is definitely somewhere we're really, really excited to go back to for sure.
You been there?
Yeah, I played that venue.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's sick. It's awesome.
Yeah, total like it was described to me when we got there as like North Carolina is like CBGBs, right?
Literally word for word what they told us.
Is the bathroom bad?
You know, I don't remember the bathroom. That's the night, like I've got this old 90s 5150. That's the night that I got drunk and pushed the whole cab over outside.
Oh yeah.
It was amp works fine. Like just trash. Basically, the bar was like, no one showed up for your set. It's cool. Open bar. They were just like, have fun, boys.
You do have some shows coming up. You have your release show on June 29th at Kung Fu Necktie, the world famous Kung Fu Necktie. You're going to be playing with a couple bands. I feel like I'm going to fuck this up. I've seen this name before. Fjorn?
Fjorn. I think it's Fjorn. I also, I've never heard it said out loud, but I think it's Fjorn.
Well, sorry. There was an Insectar. Anything that you're maybe pulling out for that show? Any surprises? Or, I mean, the songs are great. I feel like it's going to be a fun show.
I think it'll be a great time. I really like Fjorn. I like both bands, and Fjorn, they the last record they did, in collaboration with, I always pronounce their name wrong. I think it's Lane or something. They used to sing in a band, Elizabeth Color Wheel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that last collab record they did with them was incredible. So when we sort of got asked to do that, we're like, okay, let's make it a whole thing. I think that last song on the record, Septiembre in Spanish. We never really play live. It's a tough one to get live. And I think it always extends the set a little bit past 30 minutes, but for this show, we are playing that. And that's a song we haven't played live. So we're excited to do that. Like, besides the Sunny video, it's sort of like, we're really excited to like bring that and actually, play it in front of people.
I'm glad you brought up that track because upon listening to the record, it definitely feels and seems like the album closer to me. Just it's this grand, epic, anthemic kind of track. And when writing that track, did you already have it in mind, like this is what's going to end the record, or did it grow from there upon writing and playing it and kind of fleshing it out?
I just sort of had that like a piano part written, and I was toying around to where it belonged and stuff. And again, trying to emphasize this sort of like the contradictions in the record in terms of styles and stuff like that. Like I was like, okay, I want to have piano playing with guitars and all this kind of stuff like that. So I think it eventually just ended up being a closer, but it's also one of the last tracks I wrote for the record. So it kind of just ended up being that way because I was just like, I do want a piano kind of like track and everything. And I think it just fit really well. And I think it also is sort of a testament to like, where I think the music is going to go from here on out, where just like, I think you hear on the record that it starts kind of more like how our last songs always started. So like, and also if you look, the last chords in Septiembre are very similar to the chords in Redux. Like there is like the sort of circular thing that you'll hear and stuff like that. Cause I overthink everything. So I'm like, well, I have to do that. But yeah, I think it ended up growing into the last song of the record. And when I realized that, I sort of pushed for that ending to be what it was. Because I knew like, okay, this is going to end the record. And I want this to also be something that like maybe can nudge us in that direction. Like where like, I think that's where the sound is going. But writing the most recent stuff, like our sound is getting darker, I'm realizing. So I'm interested to see like if those two worlds are going to mend as I keep writing.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but with kind of some of that in mind, looking ahead, I definitely want people to spend time with this record and really just sit and listen with it. But looking ahead, is there anything you would want to accomplish this year, whether in writing or in engineering? I even forgot to ask. I mean, you did some scoring for some short films as well. Maybe do you want to touch into that? I would love to know what you have on the docket for this year. What some of the things you'd want to do as well.
Talking about the scoring stuff, I am working right now on a score for those same people that are doing another short film. So that's going to be really exciting. And scoring is really something I love to do. And I think like you see that in a lot of the music, especially for Lástima, like it does tend more cinematic because I do love that style of writing and everything. But yeah, I think the what I'm looking forward to is sort of now that the record's out there is seeing who connects with it and like what it can do in terms of just like opportunity wise. Like we are doing this release show in October. We're playing Philly Music Fest, which is really exciting. And we're hoping that other people sort of connect with the record and we can do some cool fun tours or play some cool festivals next year. I think that's the big thing. But I'm very impatient, so I'm already writing the next thing. And sort of seeing the response from this and everything like that sort of definitely like helps me, like affirms me in terms of like what we're doing next. Cause like having that record in the back burner or like ready to come out for so many months, almost like half a year, it sort of makes you go like, oh, what's next thing? Like I can't even think about the next thing. But now that it's out, I feel really like a clear road ahead of me. So yeah, just, continue engineering, working on projects that are interest me and stuff like that. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
Wonderful. Before we go, we typically share some things that we've been listening to, things we think people should check out. What have you been listening to? It could be heavy or non, doesn't matter. I would love to hear what you've been checking out as of late.
Honestly, I'm so bad with checking out new stuff just because like, working in music, sometimes the last thing you want to do at the end of a recording session is listen to music. So I'm listening to audiobooks and a lot of podcasts about weird shit. But I think more recently, the new Natalia Lafourcade, that Mexican singer-songwriter, released a record, and I think she's flawless. I've yet to hear a bad record. It's more folky, a lot of folk instrumentation and Mexican stuff. Besides that, I'm like looking at actually like a playlist of like what I've listened to. I went back and listened to that newer Julie Christmas record. That record rips.
What audiobook you've been checking out? Anything?
Well, recently I haven't been checking out an audiobook. I actually read more recently this book called Monstrio, which is like a sort of magical realism book, like that's kind of Frankenstein-esque and everything. That's been really great. And podcast wise, I'm like a big True and On fan. So that podcast True and On I listen to all the time, and I think they're really funny, and their podcasts are like political but also stupid, which I love. Yeah.
Awesome. Dylan, what have you been listening to?
So I went completely into like a Florida mindset for the last few weeks, and I've been hitting up like the Morbid Angel catalog, and primarily like the Steve Tucker era, which I've spent time with but not fully in depth with. And Gateways to Annihilation, their 2000 record, the second Steve Tucker record, is magnificent. The speeds are a little slower. So like you got Pete Sandoval just like losing his fucking mind. You've got probably Steve's best vocal performance on the record, and Trey being who he is, kind of like the death metal Jimi Hendrix, with his weird, chaotic kind of vibe. And then like you've got Eric Rutan on it. He's back after leaving for the prior record. What a great fucking record. And one more, I want to add Sum 41's Chuck. I listened to it yesterday for like the first time in years and was like, God, this is a great record. I mean, there's a track on there where they actually had to call Hetfield and Ulrich up and just say, hey, this sounds like Battery, just give you an FYI, and they got the A-OK. Fun record. But yeah, that's what I've been listening to.
Great. I've been checking out the new Selenoplexia single, Chicagoland, Blackened Death Metal, Plague Dream. It's her first bit of new music since 2023's Exalt and Despair. They got some new stuff on the way. I know they're going to be playing some dates. I know one was announced with Wretched Blessing. So if they're on the road near you, check that out. Audiobook, I actually have never done that before. I didn't know that. Who would have thought? I'm like driving so much that I never thought to do it. But I listened to some of Brothers, the Alex Van Halen book. Talking about. I've been enjoying that so far. Lots of stories I didn't know. So highly recommend. But other than that, check out A Pain Bloomed from My Lungs. It's out now. Lástima. Don't be a chump. Get the record. You can get it Liminal Dread Productions, Tomb Tree, and what's that last record label? I don't even know.
Oh no, those are the two records. But then a record store in New York is holding record store exclusive, and it's limited to one in New York.
Gotcha.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Interesting. And it's like it's pretty much on everything, right? Like tape, everything. So there's no reason you shouldn't get it, for sure. Ask Richie to score your film. Ask Richie to record your band. Richie DeVon, thank you so much for joining us this week, man. I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you both. Thank you. This was awesome.
We'll be back next week with something else. You can follow us at Riff Worship Pod, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. For myself, for Richie, for Dylan, for Swindle, wherever he's at in the world. See ya.